Welcome to I Just Don't Know, a podcast where we try to learn something new, challenge my opinions, and hope to make the misinformed informed. I can openly say I've spoken when I did not need to, been unnecessarily controversial, and shared my misinformed opinion, thinking it was not. In this podcast, I will try to right some wrongs, take on a new topic each episode that I think I knew, but in fact I just don't know. This episode is about spirits, spectres, spooks, and things that go bang in the night, as well as apparitions, local mysteries, folk stories, and haunted stagecoach inns. I am of course talking about ghosts and the UK's obsession with them. So in this episode is inspired by a discussion I had a few weeks back where we were talking about different ghost stories or local ghost stories that they were determined were true, the people I was talking with, and they were determined that where they used to live there was definitely a ghost there. There was definitely something there that was with them when they were on their own, and as a result they never wanted to stay in on their own. They never wanted to be left overnight in the dark, sort of especially a night with no full moon or something like that. They were determined that there were ghosts live there, and so this got me thinking: why is the UK, not just this person but lots of other people in the UK, obsessed with ghosts? They believe they exist. No one's really seen one. We sort of claim we've seen one, and so I wanted to explore this potential assumption that some people say it's ludicrous, it's ridiculous. That kicks it off nicely, that the first assumption that I'm going to try and challenge and look at and question that I wanted to propose is the UK is clearly obsessed with ghosts in some sense, but ghosts appear in all form of cultures, and why is that? And why is the idea of a ghost in not just the UK culture but in general communities such a big thing for people to hold on to, and how does a ghost sit within a community? So we're going to see how that goes. Listen to find out more. So we're going to start with the definition of a ghost. So according to the old internet, a definition of a ghost in folklore: a ghost is a soul or a spirit of a dead person or animal that can appear to be living. And in ghost lore, descriptions of ghosts vary widely, from an invisible presence to a translucent or barely visible shape or silhouette of a person or figure. But it also could be a realistic, lifelike form that moves in a way that a human might move. And there's also some aspects of a ghost, especially when linked with a deceased person, and the deliberate attempt to actually contact these sort of people is called necromancy or spiritism. So those sort of people that come and claim they sort of talk to the dead, and this old obsession with in medieval times, and also in fantasy films that you might have seen, and necromancy is a big one, with contacting the dead. But there are other terms associated with it that I mentioned earlier. So apparitions, which I was quite like, as I like that word is because it is just there and suddenly not there. But also a ghost could be related with haunting, phantoms, poltergeists. So I always associate poltergeist with the Disney character causing absolute havoc in the old Disney films. I think the first one, and then you've got spectres that is always quite a popular word to use as something that is difficult to see, and then you've got spooks. So you've got the classic MI5 TV show Spooks, sort of relating to there. A ghost is something that's can't be seen, but is there, but and it could be dangerous. And then the ones that are a bit more related to perhaps the fantasy of and the imagination of things like Lord of the Rings and Narnia. You've got wraiths, demons, and ghouls. So ghosts and the idea of the sort of the dead coming back to life to haunt the living is it can vary from something quite comical to something quite scary, and that's where there's quite a wide area for ghosts and where they sit within a community. And I think that gives it that sort of flexibility of what people what story they want to paint. But we're going to move into now a great article by a very someone I'm a huge fan of, and a great comedian and producer and writer, and that is, of course, the magnificent David Mitchell from Peep Show and many more other shows. And it was written a while ago, but I had to laugh at it and found it really interesting, because he looks at why, and what you asked the question of why the UK is obsessed with ghosts. And it's clear that he first kicks off by saying, well, we're clearly obsessed with the weather, and we talk about it, and it covers front page newspapers all the time, and the English culture loves to obsess over certain topics. But he breaks it down into a bit more actual sort of statistics as such. Is that he said that, well, he says it in a quite comical way that is maybe delusional, but he said that it's estimated that English authors have written 70% of all published ghost stories, and 38% of Britons believe in ghosts. And at the time, in the early noughties, that's the same percentage of people in Europe, or, well, in the UK, it's by a Europoll, that believe in God. So he jokes that the same number of people who believe in God believe in, the people who believe in God believe in ghosts as well, or is there a crossover? Well, it's difficult to know, but it's maybe that God is sort of the more mainstream than ghosts. But it does, yeah, as he said, it does suggest that there are people that believe in ghosts but don't believe in God. I think that's actually more common now. If we fast forward 15 years, there are people who not sure about ghosts, but they definitely don't believe in God. And why is that? Maybe because there's so much sort of things related to God that are out of your control, whereas ghosts are a ghost story that is bespoke to your situation, your village, your town, your house, and you get to paint the story, or tell the story. Paint the picture, tell the story, and you're in control of it. Therefore, the likelihood of it potentially being true it's very much up to you. But David Mitchell puts it nicely, and as a pretty grim philosophy. If you don't believe in God, but you do choose to believe in ghosts, it's pretty grim, because with no Christianity, you're basically saying, okay, there's no heaven, no hell, just eternity of haunting for those that die. And ghost, and that when you die, you're done for. There's no lovely end to go, second life to go into. You just become a ghost, and you live there being there to haunt anyone who's remaining. So it's definitely a strange English obsession that he points out. And he continues to actually bring in a source from a guy called Dr. Shane McCorristine. He's a research fellow at Cambridge, and he sort of brings it back to the Reformation. So after in sort of the 16th and 17th century, he sort of points out that by abolishing the idea of purgatory, moving away from Catholicism and more to the Protestantism, it's sort of, there's this idea of the people of the UK or England, they need to somehow explain what's going on when sort of strange things happen, or the idea of where the dead might go. And he points out that any sort of ghostly occurrence, they couldn't help but relate it back to something that was showing that this person was not deserved of going to heaven, and maybe they're stuck somewhere as a ghost. But they couldn't say it's purgatory, because that's basically relating it to saying that they believe in sort of ideas of that the Catholics believe in. So they had to find something else, and that something else was ghosts. And so that's an interesting potential sort of link that really gave it that kickstart or regeneration of the idea of ghosts, is that the Reformation and the tendency of the English people trying not to look Catholic and be more Protestant. But how do you explain all these ghostly going-ons and all the things that might happen? So it could be doors banging open, or sort of shapes in the night walking across, causing sort of strange events. And we're going to cover a number of ghost stories later on that will be interesting, and hope you enjoy those ones. But it's interesting how the English could have come back from just of this religious view. But it was I sort of read into an open learning transcript actually between a couple of historians and ghost hunters, and two of them, Laurie Taylor and Annette Hill, and they sort of outlined how, yes, you could point it back to the Reformation, but ghost walks, ghost hunting, ghost tourism, ghost shows, they've become even more popular in the last sort of 20 to 30 years as religion has become less popular. So pointing to how it is intrinsically linked with religion, the idea of ghosts and how people believe in ghosts. It's an alternative. It's something that you don't have to. You can believe in instead. You could say in the last 30 years. But then Annette Hill points out that the belief in ghosts and the idea of ghosts causing havoc in the community, that's been going on for more than 500 years. It's been going on for a lot longer, and it's not just Catholicism, it's not just Christianity. It's in lots of different religions and cultures. The idea of the people that have passed away existing, and or something that shouldn't be there is there and causing absolute havoc. So it's difficult to know why ghost stories or the idea of ghosts are so popular and they grow. I think it depends on the times. I think as I said just then, in recent times, as the belief in religion has declined, it's allowed a gap in the market for those who want to believe in ghosts. So interesting. But I want to finish up with how ghosts are related to Christmas, because it's recording this just before Christmas, and there's definitely a link with sort of huddling around the fire in the depths of winter, where it's dark in the morning, dark in the sort of afternoon, and the UK, or people in Europe anyway, love the idea of just sort of sharing some ghostly stories in that time, whether it's with your friends or the family. And there's a great article by Mark Gatiss on the joy of festive frights, and he sort of outlines how when we are, as I said, talking around the fire, we like stories that the spookier the better. The more that it can grip our imagination and get us sort of curious about what could be or what shouldn't be, or the supernatural, as I should really call it. That is what we enjoy. And he links it back to a few sort of classic tales. You've got the most famous is Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, and that is obviously from the Victorian times. There, it's probably one of the most successful ghost stories, maybe ever, but also definitely at Christmas time anyway. But what I didn't realise is that Charles Dickens had also written and published ghost stories that were a lot darker than just the Christmas Carol. In particular, the Chimes, and the Chimes is a really sort of dark story, and I wanted to share that a little bit with you. It's not necessarily about ghosts, but it shows that especially in the Victorian times, the idea of sharing a sort of a ghostly, scary story definitely grew further, whether it was with the working or middle class, or probably not the upper class, but definitely the working class who enjoyed, and middle class that enjoyed these published sort of novels. But the Chimes was published in 1844. It's a year after the Christmas Carol, and it's the second series of Charles Dickens' Christmas books. So Charles Dickens is supposed to be, it's sort of a nice family story, sort of fairly PG, but the idea of, and to be fair, it is very much in line with some of other Charles Dickens' stories with class and the working class versus the upper class. But overall, if the plot summary is that you've got this poor elderly guy called Trotty on New Year's Eve, and he's filled with gloom, and there's reading the newspaper that's reporting crime and immorality, and he's sort of thinking how the working class are ever going to be going to get rid of the image that they are truly wicked by nature. It is the poor's fault, and that is a well-known idea of the Victorian time, that the poor are poor for a reason. It's their own fault. But he has a daughter called Meg, and he has a fiance called Richard, and they look to get married. And so Trotty is happy for them, and he's tries to ignore all of the negative thoughts that he has. But then they meet an older sort of a pompous alderman, and then also a political economist, and then also a young gentleman who is very sort of impressive. So these interactions with this upper class, he realizes, well, Trotty over the series of these interactions realize that how they're ever going to meet the same standards that they have, how they're ever going to experience the world the same way. And eventually there's a number of interactions. I won't go into the whole story, but eventually Trotty has to go to a church to find and resolve the situation, because I think Richard, the fiance, is in trouble, and he's been accused of vagrancy, which is just sort of not working. And so he goes to the church, climbs the bell tower, and Trotty meets a number of goblins who are in attendance of the bell tower and look after that sort of haunts that area. And he actually then they tell Trotty that he's actually he died trying to climb the bell tower, and he's actually dead, and he sees what could happen to Meg and Richard, his son, and his future son-in-law and his daughter, and see how they drink themselves to death, and Meg sort of can't save him, and then she dies as well, and it's all basically just very, very bleak. And I'm like, oh, Charles Dickens' spooky story here, going pretty bleak. But then instead of sort of jumping, it's almost similar to, I think it's A Wonderful Life, where the person decides not to jump off the bridge. He actually sees what life could be like if they make the right decisions. And so it goes back to that, and it says, well, no, actually, Trotty, you find he wakes up at home, and he has a choice. Does he continue to live a better life and try to not be downplayed by the upper class, or does he just accept the fate that they have? Should he have the harsh consequences, or just enjoy the happinesses of what you've got? So it's less of a ghost story, I've realised, but it is a Christmas story that Charles Dickens tried to share with sort of following the Christmas Carol, try to continue that idea of sharing something that's pretty bleak, but actually sort of spooky and scary and sort of a bit sort of thought-provoking anyway, to try and think about what life choices you would make, and how you would sort of deal with the sort of the difficult choices in life. So that's Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and also the Chimes, which was a bit strange, but also the idea that Christmas is related to ghosts is that it's that sort of annual event of something happening, or annual event that will unsettle the sort of the normality of what's going on. So whether that's each Christmas a certain ghost will return to haunt whatever house that they're haunting, or something like that. But this article by Mark Gussis continues to go on about sort of how there's a popularity of you enjoy at Christmas time the great things in life, but then also there's a flip side of where sort of trolls and goblins live and the ghosts live, and that's sort of this other world that can come to visit, unfortunately, and we have to be wary of that. And the idea of stories following those lines and keeping us on our toes effectively is really interesting. But to the next sort of last thing I wanted to touch on then is sort of ghost stories and how people try to actually prove them and think they're actually true. So this using a bit of information from the infographics show that I've found. So in the past, sort of how do we explain sort of ghostly happenings? So it was actually mentioned, it's outlined here, it was actually mentioned in the Bible that Jesus was mistaken almost as a ghost when he was walking on water. So that suggests the idea that a spectre or a shape that is not living dates back to when the Bible was written in sort of the first millennium. But they put it down to a few other things in terms of ghosts and any recordings of ghosts, that ball lightning and lightning could be mistaken as spirits. So when sort of certain lightning can sort of shape itself, it could be mistaken as something that's a bit more human. Secondly, they outline that mental health and the idea of people having visions and whether it's taking certain drugs or hallucinogens, they can claim they're a ghost, but we now know that it's just chemical reactions and imbalances and distressing sort of things that might be happening to someone's mind, unfortunately. So that's a sort of a possible explanation for anyone's claims of a ghost that we now no longer see, perhaps. And then lastly, there's a theory, not necessarily proven, but there's a theory that some do support, that sound waves on the human body can be felt, and they date back from our survival instincts. And I think they outline here that ELF waves that, for example, large animals that are a danger to us making large deep noises, we will feel those in our body and naturally feel a chill and an idea of fear and an idea that we needed to run away and make safe. And there's a theory that things like ill-fitted fans or old large electronic equipment built sort of in the 50s or 60s, and maybe something that still needs to be sort of completely torn out, like in a house, they generate these waves and cause us to have that feeling. So a couple of attempts there to sort of disprove common sort of ghostly occurrences. So there was 3 examples of ghost stories or ghost sightings that they analysed that sort of go from clearly fake, possibly fake, and possibly real. And I just wanted to cover those to see how we might be skeptical around ghost stories and how there is maybe justification to be skeptical. But so the first one is a hotel in 2012 in the US where there's someone screaming from a room, and the security guard goes to the room, can hear it, and decides to finally go into the room and finds the sort of furniture upturned, the carpet ripped up, and there's sort of communication over the radio before they head into the room, and as they are entering the room between the head of security and the security guard in the hallway. But it's clear that there's a camera that's looking right at the door at the security camera, that the security guard that is facing right on that room specifically, none others. And it's also in a position where you would never put a camera. And I think the security, they outlined how the head of security of that hotel had many years of experience in Vegas and things like that. So he would have definitely never have put a camera there. Also, the security guard entered the room on his own, and if they should only enter the room on their own if they think a member of a guest is in physical danger. In this case, there was no sort of clues to that, but I suppose someone screaming could suggest that, but still they should have gone in pairs. And also then they later find out that the person who posted this video of this screaming potential ghost in a room had made horror films in the past, so it was pretty clear that it was just an attempt to gain some popularity, gain some attention. So the second one is in 2010 in Disneyland, Florida, that there was on cameras there's a figure sort of strolling through the park at night, and the Disneyland Ghost, and it was seen on multiple cameras and a cell phone, someone filming the cameras with their cell phone as well, of this figure sort of drifting across the camera. But it moves just like a person, and it's clear that potentially the camera could have been old footage or footage of a security guard just wandering through. Maybe it's a bad image, and so it's pretty clear that it's clearly just footage of someone going through, and it could have just been put together to claim that it's a ghost. So again, pretty rubbish story. So you can see where we can be skeptical. But then the last one was a family went to a battlefield of a battle fought in the American Civil War, and his family with the dad, with a general, normally a decent camera, with his family was there, but they started to see these sort of spectres, and it never really tries to focus on the ghost and then loses it, and then sort of captures it in the corner of the camera, and then captures in the middle of the camera, and often in ghost stories that people are trying to capture, the ghost is always appearing on the corner of the camera, or they don't want to give it away, so they never really focus right on the camera. Whereas in this case, the father is clearly sort of worried or concerned. I think the daughter and the son is clearly worried. The wife is concerned. None of them are actors. None of them are professional actors in that sense. So to be able to recreate that would be pretty difficult. So I reckon they just got a bit of the spooks and were absolutely terrified of something they didn't really understand. Whether they were seeing an actual spectre, I don't know. But it's a little bit more legit that they could be seeing something. It was probably something just like fog or something, but that's me being skeptical. So yeah, so interesting stories there that sort of create that skepticism about ghosts, but it clearly shows that we do love a ghost story, and whether it's fake or not, it will always get our attention, and people even use it for their own gain to get our attention, whether it's about their business or their production capabilities. And we love a good Christmas song in the winter. A Christmas ghost story in this Christmas time, and when it's sort of the depths of winter. But overall, we just really do love ghosts, and continue to listen as in the second part, where we're going to look at some really great ghost stories and ask some questions about sort of why they make us so scared. Thanks so much.